Okay, let's get on with the business of the mystical stream, because it's one of those subjects that is genuinely fascinating. I think that anyone who has any kind of a deep enough background in human design has a chance to see that circuits are something that are really the ways in which we are constructed. And it's only when you begin to see how gates function within a circuit that you really grasp the way in which everything is constructed through these ways. They're just ways. I was given a lot of circuitry as a matter of fact. Much more circuitry than certainly is in the basic way that human design is presented, that is for analytical purposes. The 6 circuits that are used in analysis are essential to understand the vehicle's process. But there are circuits that are for very different things. I guess the most complex and I guess one of these months down the road, I will do it as a Sunday lecture program. But one of the most extraordinary circuits that I was given was the memory circuit, and it's fascinating. Memory is so much, the basis upon which we excel. I mean, the self-reflected consciousness without memory is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It's right back to. There were some people who would say that's a Buddhist state, but it would not be interesting. Anyway, there's something really dangerous about always forgetting, like my computer. And nonetheless, there are circuits that are really extraordinary. We see that, for example, when we look at sexuality and the way in which sexuality operates. And we also see that every time that you enter into circuitry of any kind, that you have highly specialized keynoting. This circuit, this stream, this mystical way, this is something that is it's enormously important to a very few, because it's really what it comes down to, because the window is closing. We have an ending to our spiritual quest. We're at the end of that kind of fascination. And as I've been talking about for many, many years, as you approach that, you will get more and more reaction, more and more last gasp, screaming at the wind. And we certainly have a lot of that screaming at the wind. We're beginning to hear it. I am overwhelmed by the fact that the impact that mutation is going to have on the 19th gate is going to bring to an end what has been one of the fundamental ways of humanity, and a way that you can see is not an end in itself. It's one of the things about vanity. I guess one of the first things that I heard about enlightenment that actually rang a bell with me, and I have repeated it often, is this comment about stupid before and stupid after. The mystical way doesn't lead anywhere. I guess that's what I want to say, which is an odd thing to say. The mystical way truly doesn't lead anywhere other than to the end of the mystical way. And it is very much the theme of the closing of this cycle we have until 2027. The closing of this cycle where the true potential to fulfill the mystical way is still there. And the pressure is still there that drives it. Every day, as we move closer to 2027, Every day, the 19th gate and its connection to the 49 becomes more and more distorted and becomes less and less clear. Slowly but surely, this is all being squeezed off, choked off, and it's actually being choked off from the 49. Least we forget that the 49th gate is a gate of rejection, and that this is a very, very powerful theme. And it is the ultimate fulfillment of the purpose of the 49th gate that in its mutation as the parallel chemistry to the 55th gate, the codon histidine, that it is the fulfillment of its purpose to cut us off from that 19th gate. Now, it's one thing to talk about, as I did last time, about that, what that means from the perspective of losing the 19, this wonderful death of God, which I think is hilarious because it isn't going to matter after 2027 to anyone born after 2027, other than through conditioning, and obviously there will be a great deal of that. And it will really fade from the scene when the last being born before 2027 finally dies, which may be somewhere in the beginning of the next century. This is all coming to an end. And it doesn't lead anywhere because this is the end of humanity's potential. To really grasp that is quite something to grasp. See, I've talked around all of this for a long time. The end of innovation, the collapse of the institutional constructs that have held everything together in a semblance of civility, the end of the cross-of-planning era. When you think about that, you have to see it all in a larger context. The larger context is that, what's opposite to 55? It's the 59th gate. When the 55 mutates, the 59th gate mutates. When the 59th gate mutates, the whole business of human fertility is something that immediately goes downhill. Now, it's an interesting thing to think about, that this is the demise of humanity as we know it. In other words, this is our death knell. It's not like we won't linger on for another 1,000 years or so, because we will linger on for another 1,000 years or so. But in the great scheme of things, in the billions of years that it's taken for us to emerge physically on this plane, that last 1,000 years doesn't really mean anything at all in relative time frames. And what I'm really saying is that the end of the mystical way is the death of humanity. And it'll be, a lingering death. But it means something else. It means this is the time. There is an enormous, gap that we have to fill. We have until 2027. We have this opportunity as long as that pressure is there. And when it isn't there, it won't be a matter anymore of trying to devise ways, as I do now, to awaken the personality. It will simply be a matter of, the vehicle. And that the awakening of the personality is not something that will be possible because there will be no interest. I don't know if you can understand that, what that means. When you take away the basic way in which the infrastructure has moved us along this way, when you take away that pressure, when you take away its source, it's gone. The 49 no longer is paying attention to the 19. The 49 is no longer finding some way through the electromagnetic to create a quantum that is beyond the two. It's not there anymore. It's not driving this process anymore. And in the 19th gate is the pressure to transcend, rise up, and meet God. And it's going to be gone. It's really interesting to see that against the backdrop of the world that we're in right now. It's quite something to see. And our examination of the mystical way just isn't simply what I did the first time when I did this in Sedona many, many years ago. It's not about, exalting the mystical way and pointing out how incredible it is and extraordinary and, compare it to all the people that have walked the mystical path to show you their legitimacy or not, or blah, blah, blah. I really want you to see this in another way. What we are looking at here, this is the only circuit that is grounded specifically in the 19. Now, obviously, there are aspects of the tribal circuit that are going to configure in this. There's no question about that. But what I want you to understand is to see this circuit, this stream, out of context. In other words, outside, as it is here in this illustration, outside of the rest of the body graph, and understand that when you strip away that 19, what the mystical way has represented is the most and deepest inner goal for the passenger. The passenger. This has all been for the passenger. The mystical way has always been for the passenger. If I were to indulge in my black humor, I would say that it was just probably a way to keep them busy so that everything else could operate correctly. And we can see that passengers have been deeply, deeply concerned about, mysticism, religion, magic, spirituality, you name it, whatever kind of gloss you want to put on it. Think about the frenzy we have. The frenzy that comes when somebody's about to go, when something's about to be lost. When all of a sudden you realize it's about to be lost and you go racing out to find something about it. In 1961, we entered into the first line theme. That is the retrograde motion of the precession of the equinox. And we entered into the first line theme of the 37. But when you look at global cycles, you also have to look at the locks and the keys. And one of the most important aspects of the configuration of the cycle that we're in right now, the aspect of the cycle that we're in right now, is that we're in a 61-1 cycle. In other words, here is the possibility for occult knowledge. The inner truth. And the inner truth at its basis, its fundamentals. And that inner truth at its fundamentals became a global theme in the beginning of the 60s. Now, it doesn't then lead to any kind of surprise to notice that the entire New Age phenomena was born then. The so-called 60s generation, sex and drugs and rock and roll and God, And wherever you looked in the world, the 60s brought an awakening to all kinds of things along this way. Everything that's ever moved along this way. Everything. From people who read feces to people who read bumps on heads. You name it. Everything, everything, everything. It's the last gasp. It's what I like to call, it's what I named my earliest of these events, the events that Alok and I did in the 80s. The package tour to Eden, the return to Eden. And that's really what it is. It's at the end. We've gone all this way. Oh, have we multiplied, right? Oh, have we multiplied by the gazillions? Have we multiplied? We did a real good job in multiplying. Real good. Real good. And knowledge? Any surfing of the web will tell you that we have managed to amass an incredible amount of knowledge. But more than that, this era brings with it this revelation. And brings with it the possibility, not to wait for the serendipity, and I speak for myself, but literally to be able to have, the transformation of one's consciousness transferred to you mechanically. Here is the time. This is the time. And it's the time until that door closes, because when that door closes, our fertility dies. That's the whole point. You know, if you're no longer really fertile, if you take the species as a whole, and the species as a whole is no longer really fertile, then you know that there's a corollary to that, and that is that they are no longer creative. End of innovation. You know, the dying process. So this mystical way, you know, this is the thing that has been the great carrot for the passenger. Great carrot. Oh, there's a God out there. Yeah. You know, when the 19th gate disappears, raves, for example. I mean, rave children, talking about rave children. It won't even be a part of their underlying consciousness. It's not their question. And there is no answer in that. No question, no answer, neither. It won't be there. We don't know what that means. I'm not talking about atheism or nihilism. I'm talking about no question, no answer, no point. See, God is the point for us. I mean, you know, you look at the not-self, wow, you know, this side or that side of God, you know, George Bernard Shaw on his deathbed, you know, after a lifelong atheism, you know, was asked why he was doing having Catholic rites before he died. He said he wasn't going to take any chances. You know, God is what human beings are designed to think is the great thing to find at the end. And of course, what we end up with is we end up with all kinds of, you know, religious dogma that says, you know, well, yes, you'll get to sit beside God, or whatever the case may be. You know, it's somewhere down the road, you know, it's hold on. And see, this is our game. It's ours. And it's coming to an end. It really is. I mean, the greatest blasphemy in the world right now, it's not cartoons of Mohammed. It's the truth behind human design. You know, because it clearly indicates that this mystical way, first of all, it's a genetic predisposition. You know? And it is a genetic predisposition that will come to an end. It's just going to come to an end. It's going to disappear. As a matter of fact, one way of looking at it is that it's part of our evolutionary maturity to go beyond God. You know, as a theme. As a theme. It's quite something. And when I speak of God, by the way, I'm not talking about the gods. You know, let's be clear. I am talking about the wonder at what's beyond the ring past naught. Right? We have a ring past naught. That ring past naught is what we call the Big Bang, the moment of singularity, some 15 billion years ago. That is in our time frame, our time scale. According to physics, out of nothing came something. I mean, because they don't know where it came from. I mean, they don't know what was there in the beginning before the start. You know, this is where the story began for me, and the way in which the voice transmitted the knowledge to me. It began at the moment before singularity, the yin and the yang, the crystals, the way they met, you know, but still doesn't tell me where they came from, how they got there. You know, what is it about? I don't know. The wonderful thing about being a knower is to know what you cannot know. Cannot know. Have no idea. None whatsoever. As a matter of fact, for me, it is neither a question nor an answer. It is not the point. And it's become so obvious to me that it's not the point. And you must understand that the not-self thinks about this transcendent, beyond the ring past not creator, but interprets it through what I call the gods, the local forces. Exalting this local force over that local force, this god over the other, whatever they may be. None of these so-called monotheistic gods are anything more than tribal extensions. Nothing more. Tribal gods that got too big for their boots, and became mythologized beyond the ring past not. And by the way, it is very clever politically to do that. The God beyond the ring past not can never be dealt with. They just can't. You either accept the mystery or you don't. So this concept, this concept is what the mystical way has been taking us to over and over and over again. Looking for this God. And looking for this God as a way in which the passenger can find its divinity. Because that's what it's about. See, we are divine. We really are. I'm not good at being schmaltzy, but I'm well aware of my divinity. I am an aspect of this vast creative process. And it is the vast creative process as a quantum that is, in my understanding, divine. And we are it and it is us. This is the whole point of being correct, and the beauty of correctness and fulfillment of purpose is that it aligns you to your differentiated divinity, your aspect of the divine. I never forget for a moment that the neutrino that comes in goes out. It's one of the most profound things to remember. As the neutrino goes in, it goes out. Neutrinos do not park. Not possible. They go whizzing through. And as they go whizzing through our crystals, they oscillate. And what they give us, we also give it. And it takes it with it. And it takes it with it outward. At near the speed of light. My relationship with the planets within the context of understanding that neutrinos don't park, I have an immediate and real connection with the planets. Mercury might program me, but I program Mercury. Not that I want to suggest that it's as powerful. It is not. But then again, we're all programming Mercury. And that's powerful. And we don't even know it. The neutrino ocean is full of us, streaming out into space in every direction. It's really quite something to grasp. Our connection. So for me, therein lies the divinity, and in the correctness. If you're correct, the frequency that you're transmitting is at least a correct frequency amongst all of the burble and bubble that is going out there and has been going out there forever. We are informing the vehicle. Okay, let us take a look at the mystical stream. Now today, my focus today is to talk about sub-themes. We will go into analysis of the channels and the gates and the way in which the stream operates as a whole. But I think it's very important to look first at the way it's built. And let me get my little pointer here. And let's start down at the bottom. And we start with the pressure, and the pressure is the 19th gate. And you can see here that the 19th gate, that it's simply listed as the need for magic. Think about what I've just been discussing. Can you imagine not needing magic in your life? I can't. I can't. The best thing that ever happened to me was that I saw magic in my life. Continue to see magic in my life. It's extraordinary. And I'm in awe of it with all my first lines. It's like, wow, that's great. It's the pressure. It's the pressure. I'm a 49. I mean, I know what comes from the 19th gate. What a pressure. And this need, it's a need for magic. I mean, imagine. Imagine the way in which we have been designed. Think about it. Our genetic predisposition, to need magic. It's in all of us. Obviously, some more accentuated with others, depending on activations, definition, whatever the case may be. Conscious, unconscious, all the stories that we see in design. Yet to really grasp that the 19th gate is this engine. And when I say the need for magic, I'm talking about all the things that intrigue all of those that have wandered around the New Age. It is the need for Satori, it's the need for transcendence, it's the need for awakeness, it's the need for enlightenment. It is a need. And needs are not anything that can be ameliorated unless you get it. I mean, you don't stop needing something that you need unless you get it. And of course, we see how powerful that need for magic is. Look at all the people going into temples. Whoa, the numbers. Unbelievable, this need. It's a need. It's not a desire. It's not a passion. It's a need. I have to have it. I have to have magic. I have to be awake. I have to be aware. I have to have it. I have to meet God. I have to do it. I need to do it. It's absolutely necessary to do it. What a pressure. Forever. And it's coming to an end. Now that's something to think about. It's coming to an end. No more need for magic. It's such a funny thing, because it's one of the deepest things that's in us. I mean, let alone that there's mundane things about the 19 being cut off that are spooky, territory, the need for a mate. All kinds of interesting things are going to be transformed, are being transformed moment by moment by moment. Mutation isn't a moment in time. It is movement. Movement, it's an ongoing, moment by moment process moving towards the trigger. And every day, every moment, this band between the 19 and the 49, this thing is getting narrower and is functioning less correctly. Just is. Out of that, the prostate cancer and the autism and all the other things that are byproducts of attempted fertility carrying the potential of this mutation. So we begin with the pressure, and the pressure is everything. No pressure, no need. I mean, please understand that. No pressure, no need. And I want you to recognize something. This circuit, when the 19th gate and the 49 no longer connect, which is basically what's going to happen, 2027, when they no longer connect, it's not as if the rest of this circuit is going to continue to operate. It will not. It will no longer be a circuit, and it will simply be released into its various component parts in that sense. The 2010, the 2551, into whatever individual processes they're part of, and the 4037, as an example, back into its tribal framework. What I'm trying to say is that this circuit won't be there. It won't work at all. So when you take away the pressure, you close this whole thing down. So what we're looking at is a little bit of future and a lot of history. A lot of history. What's so wonderful about the mystical stream is that you can take a look at any mystic's design, any spiritual person's design. And you can see clearly, A, if it's legitimate rather than being conditioned, and B, what it's all about. And yet, to be able to read anybody that way beyond 2027, other than those that were born beforehand, it just won't work. The themes will no longer be there. These underlying keynotes or additional secondary, tertiary keynotes that are there for specific gates, that function will no longer be there because the specific pressure that drives it is gone. It's gone. And it's not so much they will disappear, they atrophy. They just stop. They just stop functioning. They slowly deteriorate and they're slowly cut off, and that is the end of it. I mean, we're carrying the last hope of the fulfillment of this way, because that's what it's all about. Everything about the way is that supposedly the odds are that there are some who will complete the process. I mean, and here is our opportunity in that sense to complete the process, at least until the door closes. Okay. So the first thing is the pressure, and obviously the pressure is the most dynamic key in the sense that, we get to see and understand that there is a deterioration in this. But let's put that aside and just look at the stream and its function for a moment. When we move to the 37 and the 49, now you'll notice something here. This isn't the way that you would normally place these in a graph as binaries. And what I mean by that is it would seem to be much more natural that you place the 49 and the 19 together, for example, and the 37 and the 40 together, as an example, or the 51 and the 25 together. And you can see that obviously it is not that way. And it is not that way for a number of reasons. That is, first of all, this system is sort of like integration in that, it operates as a whole unit rather than as channels, if I can express it that way. That's why the 19 is so important to this circuit. It's like one giant channel that has these little subdivisions in it, and the subdivisions do different jobs. And the most important job that they do is that they cross the zone. So, for example, if you're looking here at touch, the touch, and that's very different from touch, you're looking at the crossing of the solar plex. Right? In other words, the 49 to the 37, this movement across the solar plex. In the same way that the 4051 is this movement across the heart center, and the 2510 is movement across the G. And that you can see that the beginning and the end stand alone. So there is just so that you can see the mechanism that is at work in those. All right, let's talk about the touch. This is a wonderful thing about words. Somebody who has the touch is a way of describing somebody that can put their hands on you, for example, and heal you. There's a slang in America that pronounces it tetched, and it means that something's gone wrong with your hand. It is the hand of God. It is so many things, but it is physical. It's physical. And when you look at the 49th gate, the fear of the gods, what you're looking at is the physical fear of what the gods can do. The 49 understands the game. That is, because the 49 itself is a acceptance-rejection binary, it understands that it can be rejected by God. And primitive humanity had to go through this ordeal of, building their idols and worshipping them, and then they get 7 years of drought and they smash the idol to pieces because, they didn't get enough to eat. And there is this fear that the gods will turn against you. There is this fear that you will be cursed, There are all these fears that are there in the 49th gate. And it is the fear of the retribution of God, of being physically having to deal with, in that sense, God. It's the 49th gate where the most extraordinary theme of the spiritual mystical process is laid out. And it is the theme of sacrifice. I think sacrifice is a horrendous thing. A horrendous thing. And this fear of God breeds sacrifice. It breeds the sacrifice of the young, Abraham and Isaac, or Jesus on the cross, or however you want to look at those myths. It brings sacrifice in obedience to God. I will sacrifice my pleasure and be celibate. I will sacrifice my power and eat sparingly, and whatever the case may be. I'll sacrifice my whatever, to do this, to do that, to do the other thing. I will sacrifice. Not only that, religions actually claim that God specifically asks for our sacrifice. Specifically asks for our sacrifice. And you see, the sacrifice works because of the fear of the consequences. That wonderful Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited. God said to Abraham, kill me a son. Abe said, God, you must be putting me on. God said, no, this is no joke, man. You do what you say. You kill your son, or you're gonna suffer. You sacrifice him. Go ahead. And what's worse is that old Abe is praised. Because he was ready to sacrifice his son. I'd kill somebody who wants to sacrifice mine. It's all here. It's horrendous. It's been going on for as long as we have had this genetic imperative. Sacrifice. It is one of the great blessings for me that the 49th gate is in the same codon as the 55, and that this thing will finally come to an end. We are not here to sacrifice. We are here to be correct. Whatever that brings, this or that, doesn't make any difference. But this is not something that, we're supposed to do. This is all a lie. It's all a trick. It's the way the not-self follows genetic imperative. It's why we've been on this long road, to get back to Eden, to be able to look at what we've learned and see, finally, what is. I don't want to offend anyone's sense of spirituality. I assume I am. But the fact of the matter is that when I look at it, I see very clearly that, this stream is the heart of what I've always called killer monkeys. This is the killer monkey. Always trying to rise up above the beast and remaining the beast. Suffering is not what we are here for. We are not here to suffer. It is a lie. It's always been a lie. Ignorance is here to suffer. It's why we were sent out to seek knowledge. And in wisdom there is no suffering. And there sure as hell is no sacrifice. There just is, isness, itness, whatever you want to call it. And then you get to the 37 and see what happens when you cross this. You get to worship. To worship. You know. We love you, God. Yes, yes, yes. Worship. Worship and prayer. It's the 37 way. Down on your knees to those great forces. I mean, I often think about what it was like 40,000, 50,000 years ago. You know, you're sitting outside of your cave or whatever the hell it is. You know, and suddenly there's some incredible thing, I don't know, meteorite races across the sky. What do you think? I mean, what do you imagine? Built into you is this mechanism that says, somebody's throwing that at us, or it's a sign from God that we should do this or that. And everything that we don't understand, everything that we cannot grasp, we end up fearing. And in fearing it, we end up trying to attract its attention. See, everything about the 37 is the need to call for God. And it's physical. Look at all of the practices that are out there in the religious spiritual domain. And what you see is physical ritual. Physical ritual, chanting, dancing, spinning, you name it, whatever the case may be. This coming together of the family of God. You know, this deep family, tribal, all together, physically together. Well, how deeply homogenizing that is, after all. You know, these are the people that are afraid not to go to the religious service that their society or culture demands. These are the people that have to go to church because they're afraid of the consequences. They have to, get on their knees 5 times a day because they're afraid of the consequences. And all it does is dull them into this mindless fear worship binary. Oh yeah, it can be exalted like anything else. After all, the 4037, as you'll see, is the great mystical bridge. It's a very mundane place. This is the place where you go to church. This is the place where you built it. But it isn't the place where you can experience transcendence. It is about locking the tribe together. Locking them together. Remember that when you're looking at the mystical stream, it is so obvious that all religious imperative, all spiritual imperative, the need for magic begins in the tribe. It is a way in which as human beings gathered together and reproduced and grew as communities, it is a way they could come up with common answers to the unknowable. And that it became the way in which the tribe was held together. It is the glue. Worship is the glue. Look what happens from the 60s to the 90s as an example. Vast numbers of Protestant churches all over Europe and in some areas in the United States, and Catholic churches actually in the United States, they lost endless number of parishioners. And when people don't worship, the religion begins to lose its power. I mean, not that God, quote unquote, would lose its power. But the faith itself, which is a community organization. I mean, the cross of planning is bringing an end to, as it closes, as we move towards 2027, it's bringing an end to institutional vitality. In other words, the ability of large institutions to be able to look after the basic needs of their community. And that does not leave out the institutions that are associated with the various religions. In other words, the impact on this is that they are not going to be able to maintain the power of it. And again, it's got to move into post-2027. So the 37 and the 49, this is the touch. And of course, you can also see that this is the emotional part of the spiritual way, of the mystical way. That this fear of God is an emotional thing. That worship is an emotional thing. That is, that brings highs and lows. And one of the most important things about the communal religious experience is to raise everybody up. There is nothing like a Southern Baptist church to give you an idea of what that means, where everybody is jumping and singing and happy and smiling and wonderful. They're physically locked together in this worship dance, and it holds their community together. It allows them to say, we are here together. This is us. You're different over there. Oh, and that you're different over there is something that has plagued us forever. Forever. I don't get it. There's little things that just sort of stick in your throat. There has never been a great religious founder who has ever preached anything other than love thy neighbor. There isn't a holy book that exists that doesn't have as its basis, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't. But that's not what this part of the mystical stream is all about. It's so interesting what it's about. Think about it. Think about how many times you've wondered why everybody on the planet doesn't know about human design. Think about that. That's what this is about. What this is about is that when the tribe brings all the forces together, the tribal community together, it is actually creating a place for those to reject it. From the tribe, out of the tribe. To reject it. First, you have to submit to it. First, you have to be part of it until you get to a point where you can finally deny it and find the courage to seek out the truth for yourself. And one of the most beautiful things about what the 37 actually does is that it pulls all of these tribal forces together into this fixed and rigid ritual in order that there may be some that will get it and get out. Some. It's fractals, after all. It's just fractals. See, when the mystical way was laid out, in laying out the mystical way, if I can put it that way, it was never assumed that humanity as a whole was ever going to win the game, if you know what I mean. It's not the way that it works. It's why it all begins at the tribal, and why the 4037, which is, the bridge, and is in essence not a mystical channel, that it is the bridge to that possibility of transcending the limitations of, that tribal emotional lock. Everybody's got to go through it. Everybody's got to go through it until it ends. At some point, fortunately, at least for me, I see that it will end. And we will no longer be in this bind because you can't get out. The not-self can't get out of this as long as the pressure is there. As long as the deep fear of being rejected is there. As long as there is the force of their tribe, pulling them to worship and ostracizing them if they do not. All of that stuff that's there. It's very, very powerful. And it's deeply emotional. Deeply emotional. And not clear. It's never been clear, after all. Never. Every once in a while there are those that get out. And you have to get out through the door of initiation. It's a different process. Okay, so let's move for a moment now from the touch. And let's begin looking at the power. And of course here you see the power in the context of the ego. And you have the two ego gates that are part of the stream, the 40 and the 51. I've stated it before. I've stated I think in the first semester when we were discussing my own mystical process, that for me it's obvious that the deepest mystical gate that I have is the 40th gate. It's so clear to me. It is the 40th gate that was where I was called. I only have 2 second lines, and one of them is the second line of the 40. And it's so clear to me that this is where my life was transformed. And I was clearly a denial being, that is, the 40th gate without the 37. Denial for me was the natural way to look out at what I saw was a kind of rigid, inclusive madness when I looked at other people's spiritual practices. I had the unusual advantage of not being raised with any spirituality because my parents were mixed in terms of their religions. No religion was in the house, so I got to look at all of those things with a different view, and it was so obvious to me what it looked like. This tribal stickiness where everybody mumbles the same words at the same time, and everybody does, the genuflections that are expected, and all of the things, these patterns that are set up. You can't eat the food until somebody says grace, and on and on and on and on, whatever the case may be, whatever the nuance is of all of that. And so the 40th gate is a gate of denial, and you can see that there is this, I have, as a 40 and a 49, I have so many 4037s that have been a part of my life. And you really see how difficult this channel is, to have the whole channel, to have this quantum between denial and worship. That is not an easy thing. And the channel 4037 is described as the channel of the bargain, but it begins with this inner bargain. There's an inner bargain every 4037 has to come to. This bargain between what is going to be their balance between denial and worship, because they're very much at odds with each other. Very much at odds. And it's something to understand that when you look out in the world of spirituality and you see people who only have the 37, or people who have the 37, 49 and the 19, any of those 3 gates, these are the ones that have a deep connection to the traditional spiritual process. Deep connection. But the moment that you get to the 40th gate, that's a very different thing entirely. Entirely. This word, power, is very different from touch in a way. That is, it's not tribal power. It truly isn't. It is ego power. It is individual ego power that is designed to meet the emotional openness of the tribe. But it is ego power. It is not individual in the sense that we talk about individual circuitry, but then you have to understand that the 40th gate is rather unusual. It's supposed to go to the 21, That is its natural movement. It's supposed to go to the 21. That's where it goes. That's where, tribal circuitry finds its expression in the throat through the 4521, the channel of materialism and all of that. That's the way it's supposed to go. And it doesn't always. And again, it's something to understand about looking at anybody's 40. For example, you see people have the 40 and they have both the 51 and the 21. It's very interesting about that 40. It's always in a sense, which way do I go? Do I take the mundane plane, or do I take a risk? Do I go off the edge? Do I submit to a greater power, or do I embody power? Do I give my power to those that need it for the worshipping and the respect of the fear of the God? All of those things. And yet to see something so clearly is that the 40th gate, how powerful it can be, because everything is a duality. Not afraid of the gods, not worshipping. All of these things are duality, and clearly you have to see that. Denial becomes, an acceptance. The only difference is that when you're dealing with the ego, they will not accept anything other than what is tangible. Tangible. Even after I had my experience, I found it really difficult to hear people tell me their mystical stories, because my tendency was not to believe it, even though I had just gone through an extraordinary event. But the event for me was legitimacy for me. That is, it was one of my standing jokes when in my earlier life I would, rip into religion that, people would say, well, what would it take? And I would say, well, if God shows up and talks to me, I'll accept that there's God. That's an ego talking. But that is what the 40th gate is all about. The potential in the 40th gate. What happens so often in the 4037 is that the 40 gets trapped in its relationship with the 37 and is constantly being pulled away from the 51 potential. The bargain is too deep. It becomes the bargain with the whole tribal dynamic and all of the pressure that comes with support mechanisms. So the 40th gate is something, and when we get to do the analysis of the gates themselves, this is quite a mechanism, because it is the real switcher here in the mystical stream. It's the thing that makes the difference, that makes it unusual. This is an unnatural, in one way, combining of tribal and individual, and yet in another way it is not. It is one of the things that I've mentioned so often about the relationship between individuality and the tribe, is that they have a fundamental respect for each other. They do. The individual can benefit from the fact that if they're not in the tribe, that the tribe will leave them alone as long as they stay away. And often individuals would prefer that than being caught in conditioning. They also know that the tribe respects them and is often very warm and open to them, particularly when they need to, the farmer's daughter story, when you need to increase the gene pool and add something new into the gene pool. So there is this very, very deep relationship between them. And so here the 40th gate is a gate that carries very, very unique qualities in that, and in many ways, when you take it back up to the surface, and you understand as we go through this process how profound the role of the 40th gate is in all of this process, to see how that impacts in ordinary mundane analysis, particularly looking at 4037s. The other thing is, and it's a thing that again is so interesting, is that as the squeeze is on for the closing of the 4919 passageway, that as that is going on, it also means that when we get to the point that happens, that the 40th gate is going to lose this wonderful wonderful potential to switch tracks, to naturally switch tracks as an underlying genetic possibility, to move that 40 to the 51. It's something that's coming to an end. Okay, let's return to the theme of power and the crossing over of the heart center. I remember that in the hippie era, that if you were going to pass somebody a joint, you passed it across your heart. And it's just interesting, this movement of the 40-51. It is crossing the heart, in a sense. And more than in a sense, it actually is in that way. In many ways, crossing the heart and avoiding it. So rather than going to the 21, it's really crossing over in that sense to the 51. The theme of this is courage. I don't want to have that taken out of context, because it can be absolute idiocy and foolishness as well. So it's just something to keep in mind. However, the power is there for the ego. It's all about the ego. The ego's got such a bad rap. The ego's had such a bad rap forever. I was always accused of being an egoist. And it's only since the voice that I realized that's a compliment. The ego is poorly understood, because 65% of humanity doesn't have a defined ego. And the not-self with an open ego has to go through a lot of shit because of what happens to them. And it really has distorted what the ego is. I like to think of the ego as the great potential clean machine. It's enormously powerful. It's enormously powerful. It carries with it that mythical quality of will. And it is something that has always stood out as, the 65% of humanity with an open ego thinks about it in the context within this way, this stream of God's will. And here in the 51, it's my will be done. It's my will. It's my will. It's about me. It's about me. It's not about us. It's not about them. It's not about we. It's about me. And that's the courage. It is the courage to stand alone, and to stand alone in wisdom or in foolishness, to stand alone in transcendence or death. It is this standing alone. And I think that one of the deepest things that we have to come to in our process all along this mystical way is the recognition that we are alone, and that it is our personal relationship with the forces, whatever the forces may be, whatever gods may be. It's this personal relationship that the story is all about. It is not the communal, ritualized, institutionally controlled, tribal spirituality. It's about the transcendence of the individual. And the thing that's so interesting for me is that the 40 and the 51, these are the troublemakers. I guess that's the only way to put it. Really, they're the troublemakers. I mean, the 40th gate is ready to deny, and has this magical quality of being able to switch, and be able to move to the 51. The 51 has this, it's all about me, and I've got to find out for myself, and I have to know, and it's, it's all of these I things. And then there's love. Ah, yes. All you need is, then there's love. I don't know if you can hear that I'm smiling, but anyway, and then there's love. And you get to the 25th gate, and the 25th gate says, I was speaking to my friend, the 49th gate, and we decided that you need to sacrifice more. We decided that we're going to channel your individual desires into some kind of well-organized initiation process. And that's exactly what the not-self 25 always does. I mean, as you will see, this is the gate of the priest and the priestess, of the shaman. And, it is always, in a sense, standing in front of the 51 and saying, you can leap, but this is where you land. This leaping into the void, well, this is where you land. I'm in charge of the landing. This is the 25. It will take me a while to be able to explain to you where the love is in that. But then again, you have to see the transcendent 25 to actually get that picture. But nonetheless, in the way in which the mystical stream operates is that there are breaks along the way. The 25 is standing there, and basically what the 25 does is take those individuals that break out of the tribe and turn them into priests and priestesses and shaman. They institutionalize them in individual roles. They try to hold back their individual drive by honing their activities into what appears to be an individual direction, where they have to go through steps of initiation and, you're a novice now and we will take you through and eventually, you will be the one. The 25 is really devious. The 25 always gets super good press. Okay? Always. But it's the gate of the inanimate. It is the coldest thing you can imagine. Oh, is it cold? I mean, it's so cold. This is the heart of a stone, the 25. And it is in that coldness that it holds back the fire that is there in the ego, tames the fire of the ego. And it's not an easy thing to warm that 25 up. It isn't. It's a cold thing. It really is. I mean, when we get there, I'll describe that in detail. The real love is that, if you can get past the priest, that's a tough job. You get past the priestess, you get past the shaman. You manage to get across to the identity, to find your spiritual identity, because your spiritual identity can only be found in the G. And there's only two spiritual identities that are possible. You are either in service of the tribe, the priest and the priestess, standing at the gate, or, self-love. Self-love. Oh, isn't that something? And all religions hate it. This is the devil's work. They hate it. You're not allowed to love yourself. I don't know why. You're not allowed to. This egoism is really bad. It's where it all comes from. All those priests terrified of all those 51 bridge people. Terrified of them. Self-love, terrible thing. Such vanity. Blah, 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 blah. Love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor. You sacrifice and love thy neighbor. And there's never been a neighbor I've known where it wasn't a sacrifice to like them, Love thy neighbor. Da, 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 da. But you can see where that comes from. This is the tribal movie. It's the tribal movie. It's not love thyself. Love thyself. No. Love God, love Jesus, love Mohammed, love them. Don't you dare love you. You're corrupt and, you're soiled and stained and you're born in sin and you're this and that and blah, blah, blah. And how dare you love yourself. Self-love is the most revolutionary of all things. But it's a long way to go in the evolutionary program. To get there. It's still difficult to get people truly to love themselves. Because they're, my old joke, how can you love yourself if you don't know who you are? Then you can't. And within that context, the not-self screaming priest is probably right. Vanity, vanity, vanity. How can you love this not-self confused whatever? But self-love is a revolution. This is the ultimate expression of love. And the interesting thing about the cold 25 is that you cannot get to it unless you go through it. And that the 25 can be transformed. It can. And it can be transformed by understanding what it is. It is the inanimate. It is the ultimate source of the form principle. And only when you are pure in the form principle can you bypass this gate. This is what it's all about. When you're correct in the form, the 25 can never stand in your way. Never. But if you're not correct, it will always stand in the way. Always. And it brings this deep coldness into the life. It's a coldness that impacts the spirit. When you get to the end of the train, you come to the expression. You come to the 20 as the way. And, it is. This is the existential, moment by moment, breath by breath, correctness in the now. This is ultimately the expression. To be awake in the now. To be oneself in the now. To be the purity of oneself in the now. To be correct in the now. And to express that correctness in the now. It is this expression that is everything. We are at the end of the process. And just about the entire planet is stuck down here. You can see it every day on the news. They don't get out of it. There are some, yes, trying to travel this road. The point is to get to this place. The expression of correctness in the now. It's my deepest goal in the work that I do. That one by one there are human beings that are correct in the now. This is the completion of this process. And at the end of this process, it is only right that it should be completed. That there are those that go through the entire process. It has been our evolutionary history. Our history. It took a long time just to develop the 1949 part of this way. Long time. I could do this analysis in terms of epochs and eras, to finally see that what it means to be here at this potential, that this potential is there, that the road is there, that the road can be taken. And that it's now. It's now. It's this 67-year slot from the beginning of the 60s to 2027. It's this slot where it can finally be realized. The completion of it. So here is our track. This is our mystical stream. The pressure leads to the fear of God and worship. But the worship leads to the potential of denial and the courage and the power to enter into one's own process. And yet there is a test. You have to be able to get past the gateway. And if you get past the gateway, you have the potential to discover self-love. And in self-love, your perfection existentially in the now. The mystical process. Remember something. It's ending. It's quite something to remember. It's ending. And that you can see that all of the precursors along the way, all of those masters and all of those beings who have influenced our spiritual direction, our mystical direction, our magical direction, that all of them were components that fit into this way at different times, highlighting different aspects. There are great teachers of the 19 and great teachers of the 49 and the 37 and the 40 and so on. We are in the time now of the 20. This is where we are. This is really what our opportunity is about. And that this is the closing, It's the beauty of it all, the potential of it all. And here, cosmology always gives me a chance to speak mystically. My personal perspective on all of this. I'm glad to see it come to an end. All things should. All things should. And it's so obvious to me that human design is here and is only here so that it provides the opportunity for a generation on their fractal, because it's your fractal, for a generation, for those that are selected aspects of that generation. Their serendipity, their no choice, their good luck, their helplessness to finish this process, because it must be finished. It must be finished. It's not about what's next. I think for all of us, the demise of this, and none of us are going to experience really, no matter how long any of you survive, as long as there are human beings who were born in this first line time, as long as they are alive, these themes will still be strongly in the world. But then they'll be gone. They'll just be gone. And it's something for each and every one of you to ponder. When you take away the pressure, you take away God. And it turns out that that might not be what it's all about at all. And it's not going to be what it's about for Raves. Not at all. No question. No answer. No point. Quite something to contemplate. Well,